Robinson Center creates new innovation space for young people. Weekend Business Report starts right now. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Kenil Gale. Thanks so much for joining us this week. We have so much news to get through, so let's start with the week's top stories from the BATV News Desk. The Bank of Jamaica BOJ is expecting inflation to return to the target range by June. Javon Keys has more.
Annual inflation as at January 2019 was 2.3%, falling well below the BOJ's target range of 4 to 6%. The central bank says inflation continues to be influenced by the fall in international oil prices and unseasonably high supplies of agricultural produce. However, inflation is expected to increase in the coming quarter. BOJ Governor Brian Winter is expecting that the inflation rate will get to a midpoint of 5% by June this year. However, despite the projections made in November, the growth rate is expected to be a little slower.
Inflation is projected to increase near to 5% in the June quarter, this upcoming quarter this year. This acceleration will come from rising food prices as agricultural supplies fall back to normal levels. Higher inflation is also expected to come from increases in prices for processed foods, energy, and transport services, driven by the expected uptick in oil prices.
At the last quarterly press briefing in November, the BOJ governor had projected a faster rise in inflation, but things have changed.
This revised outlook reflects a more moderate pace of expansion in domestic demand because of a somewhat lower growth rate that's being projected for the global economy. And also because of a smaller increase in crude oil prices compared to what we had expected in November.
Despite these projections, Governor Winter knows there's still a risk of not meeting the target.
In the meantime, Governor Winter sought to clarify that the lowering of the BOJ's policy rate on Wednesday by 25 basis points to 1.5% was not to interfere with the foreign exchange market.
Increasing the pace of expansion in private sector credit will stimulate increased economic activity by businesses and by households across Jamaica. More economic activity by businesses and households will bring with it a bit more inflation, and in that way will support inflation returning to the center of the target more quickly. The decision to lower the policy rate to 1.5% is therefore aimed squarely at stimulating this pickup in the pace of expansion in private sector credit. It is not aimed at influencing the exchange rate.
The Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, says preliminary reports indicate that the economy grew by 1.8% last year. It's the country's 6th consecutive year of growth. Here's more.
1.8%. That's how much early estimates are showing the economy grew in 2018. Director General of the Planning Institute of Jamaica, Dr. Wayne Henry, lists the continued growth in the mining and quarrying sector, record low unemployment, and low and stable inflation as the reasons for the growth.
Growth was facilitated by, 1, increased external demand for Jamaica's export industries, especially mining and quarrying and hotels and restaurants. And this was supported by higher levels of output in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners. And 2, increased domestic demand underpinned by record levels of employment. And 3, improved macroeconomic stability as reflected in a relatively low inflation and the lowering of interest rates.
Dr. Henry says data show that in the goods-producing industry, mining and quarrying grew by almost 33% last year, while in the services industry, hotels and restaurants grew by 2.5%.
For 2018, the goods-producing industry is estimated to have grown by 4.8%, and the services industry was estimated to have grown by 0.8%. Industries recording the strongest growth during the year were mining and quarrying, up 32.5%, agriculture, forestry and fishing, up 4.1%, construction, up 2.8%, and hotels and restaurants up 1.7%.
And he pointed to declining unemployment rates in all categories. The Director General says more women, men, and youth had jobs in 2018. He gave the figures for October.
The unemployment rate as at October 2018 was 8.7%, compared with 10.5% in October 2017. The male unemployment rate declined by 0.9 percentage points to 6.4%, and the female unemployment rate declined by 2.9 percentage points to 11.2%. The youth, that's persons 14 to 24 years old, the unemployment rate there was 24.9%, a decline of 0.5 percentage point relative to October 2017.
Moving on now, innovation and entrepreneurship are at the top of the U.S. Embassy's newly opened Robinson Center agenda. Jamila Maitland was at the launch event.
The Robinson American Center is now open. The modern multipurpose facility is expected to provide education advising, cultural exchange between Jamaica and the U.S., workshops geared for technology and robotics, entrepreneurship, and global affairs for youth island-wide.
Community stands at the cornerstone of American centers. It is at the center of what we do. And as part of a global network of over 650 physical spaces, the Robinson American Center serves to build bridges between people of the United States and the people of Jamaica by increasing mutual understanding, collaboration, and partnership through community-focused programs and activities.
The center, located inside the U.S. Embassy, boasts some of the latest technology. The major aim is to facilitate training in some key areas.
So, we want to be a little bit more strategic. Of course, we have our general library use where people can come in and access computers and Wi-Fi and the library catalog, but also create programming that affects specific needs that we think are important for the advancement of the people of Jamaica. So the areas of STEM are definitely important, talking about entrepreneurship and helping people realize that, they can create their own business and feeding into that through the center. And then also global thinkers, where people become more aware of global politics and international affairs and public relations, not just at the university level, but starting them at a young age.
Former State Minister and the Education Minister Floyd Green said the new center provided some opportunities to strengthen Jamaica-U.S. ties.
I really do hope that this space is really utilized to continue the work of empowering our people, continuing to spread the message of Garvey, the message of Robinson, but also I know we speak a lot about science and technology, and I'm going to come to there, but I do want to suggest, Sir Knight, that we spend some time using this space to help facilitate our young people who are interested in the creative arts. It is an area of industry that we often downplay. It's an area that we have a natural advantage of as a people. And this wonderful space, how can we infuse the technology into our creative arts industry to ensure that all the people in and around the communities that surround the embassy, but further afield, can bring life to their creative ideas.
The U.S. Embassy is situated in the Mona Division in St. Andrew, and Councillor Andrew Bellamy is welcoming the Robinson Center as he said the facility will be extremely beneficial for the young people in the surrounding communities.
This is a wonderful initiative, you understand? Standpipe community, which is immediately beside the embassy, will benefit tremendously from this partnership. We have so many young people who are in need of opportunities, in need of direction, the way to go. This center actually provides that opportunity to develop innovation, the creative arts, to develop social enterprise. It also helps us show the young people within Standpipe that there is an outlet, there's another way of actually looking on the future. It expands their horizon and things. So I welcome this. Actually, I look forward to the partnership between the community and the center. We have our ongoing history. The embassy has been a big supporter to the development of the community, and they've worked together in different areas. So this is just another way for us to strengthen that partnership and to do greater stuff for the young people, greater stuff for the community, and to also make the partnership between the two you understand, be even better.
The good thing about it is about 6 to 9 months ago, we started re-engaging with our neighbors, the Standpipe community. And they have come over here to watch movies and the likes. They've come over for tours. We've went over there. We've donated the books and bookshelves to their resource centers. And also we've sent a number of students on what we call the Youth Ambassador Program to the U.S. for 3 weeks. And they were from the Standpipe community. So the good thing about it is that, yeah, actually, I think they know better than most people around here in the greater Kingston area about the resources that are available here at the American Center. And that's good because it's come from a planning of engagements that we've done with our neighbors.
The facility is open to the general public and the services are free.
So, historically, the information with these called information resource centers were situated outside of the embassy walls and had a little bit more ease of access to them. So the public engaged, journalists engaged a lot more. When we created our new model for embassies in which we put everything inside of the walls, per se, the idea for the general public was that it was not accessible. So there were some people that know for the relationship with us that they could come in and utilize it. So our job now is to reach out there and send the message to the public that this space is open for Jamaicans. It's a free space. It offers free classes, free activities, free printing. So the more we get out there and share that, I think that it'll make it more useful for the Jamaican public, because a lot of people just don't know that this is open for them.
Place isn't boring. It's very first world. It's very actually up to date. And you walk into this place, you can feel like, this is a very premium place. You feel like you can learn a lot. Without a doubt, I would encourage all young people to take up this opportunity. Remove that one barrier, remove that stigma, come and just expose yourself. After that one time, I guarantee that you will never regret it. It will open and channel a new way for you.
Thanks, Jamila. Company news comes up next. Then later, a chip that's used for everything from opening doors to paying for goods and services. And it's implanted right under your skin. End of day sign or just simple technological advancement? We'll take a closer look at the end of the show. Stay with us. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. Sigma run tops $52 million, separate revenues up $7 billion, and Fontana says IPO was a turning point in the company's history. Here's this week's company news.
The Sagicor Foundation says they've surpassed the $52 million mark for their 2019 Sigma Corporate Run. The annual event, which is the largest in the English-speaking Caribbean, took place in the streets of New Kingston last Sunday. A record-breaking 27,028 people registered to run, walk and wheel to the finish line 5K event. The funds raised will assist the Mapen Hospital Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, the Lupus Foundation of Jamaica, and the Diabetes Association of Jamaica. Separate revenues jumped some $7 billion Jamaican dollars last year. Separate says for the 12-month period which ended December 31, 2018, revenues came in at $24.38 billion. The Separate Group points out that the 2018 results were bolstered by the transfer of the former Jamaican Dairies operation of Nestle within the group. The company says the consolidation of the dairy business will be substantially completed by the end of March. The grains mill operation is growing steadily by focusing on export markets, while they're hoping that the losses associated with sugar manufacturing will be curtailed. Fontana Pharmacy has released its first financial statements since its successful IPO in December. The company says the initial public offering was a turning point and quantum leap in their history. Fontana Pharmacy ended the second quarter of the financial year with revenues at $1.2 billion. This represents an 8.6% increase when compared to the similar quarter in 2017. The company says its year-to-date revenues increased by 7.2%. Fontana says its new location at Waterloo Square contributed to a growth in net assets of almost 15% when compared to the previous year.
Let's take a look at the closing numbers from some of the major stock markets around the world. When we come back, more of the week's top stories from the BATV News Desk, so stay with us. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. Legislation to retake ownership of the 49% shares in Petrojam held by the Venezuelan state-owned oil and natural gas company PDV Caribe was passed in the House of Representatives on Tuesday. The Compulsory Acquisition Shares in Petrojam Limited Act 2019 was piloted by Prime Minister Andrew Holness. In making the case for the legislation, Mr. Holness said not taking back the shares carried far too many risks, which not only threatened Petrojam, but has the potential to cause an economic crisis. More in this report.
The Prime Minister opened the debate on the bill by arguing that the swift and intensified geopolitical changes within the region since the start of the year are threatening Petrojam's operations. He said sanctions imposed on Venezuelan part owners PDVSA affects how the oil refinery interacts with its business partners who are concerned about being sanctioned by the United States. Additionally, he said that with a joint board of directors, no decision can be made without PDVSA. He noted that the company has not honored its agreement to upgrade the refinery since becoming part owners in 2004. They've also failed to attend meetings as mandated. And despite Foreign Affairs Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith telling the media recently that a price has been agreed on with the Venezuelans and that the only sticking points were the terms of the buyback, Prime Minister Holness told the Parliament that the government was no closer to an agreement for the repurchase of the shares. He argued that it's for these reasons and more that the government must act now to acquire the shares.
And within the context of these considerations, the government will acquire the 49% shareholding in Petrojam Limited wherever it may be held for the public purpose of securing Jamaica's energy by way of the enactment of legislation.
He said the last report from the negotiating team revealed that progress was being made. However, it was halted after an independent evaluation of the oil refinery proved that Petrojam lost some of its value since PDV Caribe bought the shares in 2007.
We are not seeking to take property without paying for it. The bill before us provides a clear mechanism for compensation as required by the Constitution of Jamaica. It even provides for money to be paid into a special account so that the funds are set aside from day one when the act comes into effect.
He said that if during the process of formulating the legislation that a settlement is reached, the government will simply suspend the bill. But in the meantime, he says his administration is committed to protecting the country's energy security and economy.
I want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that were they to sign the draft share purchase agreement before this debate is concluded today, the government of Jamaica would be willing to suspend this process and sign the agreement as well. Furthermore, if after this debate closes, well, I've been waiting for the vibration on my phone, but after this debate closes, and it goes to the Senate, and a similar call should come, we would be prepared to withdraw the bill.
The Industrial Disputes Tribunal IDT has ruled against Petrojam in the case brought by former Human Resource Manager Rose Lee Scott Heron. The tribunal, however, did not agree with Mrs. Scott Heron's claim for 3 years' salary compensation. Instead, the IDT has ordered Petrojam to pay Mrs. Scott Heron the equivalent of 12 months' salary. Sources say at the time she was dismissed, Mrs. Scott Heron was making close to $10 million per annum in basic pay and allowances. In its decision, the IDT said Petrojam's firing of Mrs. Scott Heron was not only a breach of the Labor Relations Code and rules of natural justice, but was also unfair, unreasonable, and unjustifiable. The IDT also ordered that termination payments made to Mrs. Scott Heron at the time of her dismissal should not be deducted from this payment. Mrs. Scott Heron, who was in the job since September 2014, was dismissed by former Petrojam General Manager Floyd Grindley just over a month after he took office. She was replaced by Gilland Ramarak, who recently resigned with a $13 million separation package. Confrontational, that's how government senator and the trade unionist Cavan Gale is describing a push by local business leaders to have the country's labor laws amended. He says the efforts by the private sector is an affront to due process. Here's more.
Last Friday, a joint statement from the private sector organization of Jamaica PSOJ, Jamaica Chamber of Commerce JCC, and the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association JMEA called on the Minister of Labour and Social Security to immediately consult with the private sector and other stakeholders to revise the labour code before the end of this financial year. They argued that Jamaica's labour laws are complex and difficult to navigate, and in light of the settlement between the management of Petrojam and the former human resource manager, there are major concerns to be addressed. But Government Senator Cavan Gale is contending that the private sector's leader's approach is confrontational and does not create an environment that is conducive with good industrial relations practices.
The suggestion that the Minister of Labour must make amendments before the end of this financial year is a confrontational and a backward approach. Why do I say that? This is a piece of legislation that requires consent. It is not up to the minister on her own or the ministry to make any such amendment.
Senator Gale argues that any change to the current legislation will have far-reaching effects and therefore will require extensive consultation.
It is the changes that are being suggested are going to be far-reaching. So it's difficult for me to accept that the manner in which is being put forward for a piece of legislation that requires accountability and behavior to be fashioned in that way. And I'm suggesting to the private sector that it must be driven on a platform of social dialogue, consensus and understanding.
He argues that while the current laws are working, he is not opposed to revisions. However, he points out that there are other laws which need urgent attention.
I must say, however, that it has been working and has been working very well. But there are other pieces of legislation that requires attention. There are aspects of the Employment Termination and Redundancy Payment Act that requires intervention. There's the Maternity Leave Act. From 1979, there has been no amendment. And there are other legislations that I believe we should examine.
When we come back, we'll pop into one of Sweden's microchip implant parties. That's after the break, so stay with us. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. The rise of biotechnology means that for more people, even the most cutting-edge smartphones are becoming out of date. Having a microchip inserted under the skin is increasingly the way to go. Nowhere more so than in Sweden. Take a look.
The most cutting-edge thing about Hannes Sjöblad isn't the phone in his hand. It's the microchip actually in his hand. The tiny implant is the latest advance in a biohacking technology that is steadily becoming a part of normal life in Sweden.
We have created a new implant, which is not a chip, it's a full device where you can add different lights, different vibration, different functions. Sweden is a very tech-literate society. And I think this is the main explanation, really, why a lot of Swedes are adopting chip implants.
Swedes haven't been shy about upgrading themselves with the new version. Thousands already have microchip implants that they use in their daily lives, waving their hand to gain entrance to the gym, confirm their ID or make payments. A short moment of pain not putting them off becoming part Swede, part machine.
This event is an implant party, simply where ordinary people can show up and get a microchip embedded under their skin. The biohacking movement in Sweden is hosting them all over Europe, but it's at home where they get the most willing recipients.
I think it's really cool. You don't have to carry any keys or anything. It's just your body. In maybe 10 years, everything will be in your hand.
In Sweden more than anywhere else, the future is already here. The national train company SJ has around 2,600 people signed up to use microchips instead of train tickets.
Did you see that?
And no need to mind the generation gap. 18-year-old Felicia and father Magnus still bear the scars of their new implants. Student Hannah Herving is also freshly chipped and now just needs to program it to open doors. Although importantly for a future career, it does already connect to her LinkedIn.
Some people say I'm mad that I don't know if it's safe and all that, but people have been putting these chips into animals for 20 years, so I'm not worried about that.
The long-term goal is for the new chips to help provide medical care in remote communities. They're already getting under the skin of the Swedes and may soon become just another normal part of modern life and of the human body. Paul Rees, Al Jazeera, Lund, Sweden.
And that's our show for this week. On behalf of the entire Weekend Business Report team, I'm Keneal. See you next time.